What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Table Setters, covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, I'm Steve, joined with my tag moderator, Dem. What's going on, man?
What's up, everybody? Welcome here to episode 112. We only get to do this episode once a year. It is the World Series preview. We only have one matchup left to talk about at this point. So here we go. We're going to break it down for you guys, and at the end, we'll give our predictions. But before we get there, we're really going to take a step back and take a good look at both of these teams and who we think have the advantages in different parts of the game. So this is going to be a fun one.
Of course, and we've been waiting for this lily pad to discuss this World Series, catching your breath, if you will. I heard Trevor Plouffe reference it this morning of the cigarette after fornication because of the fact that these series have been helter-skelter. I feel like we've been on a sprint going forward, and man, this is a really good time. Of course, the series kicking off on Friday, October 24th, 8 p.m. is going to be the start for all these games in Toronto. All the media is surrounding Toronto. Everything is focused around the World Series. And if you've been talking about hockey and listening to the media over there, of course, Toronto is usually driven by just all the hockey coverage and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Most of the coverage has been about the Toronto Blue Jays over there. In fact, the Toronto Maple Leafs have moved their game time on Friday night to an earlier time so everyone could focus on the Jays.
That's really wild. I did not hear that yet. That's breaking news for me. Pretty cool. I mean, yeah, I've been to Montreal a few times. I've been to Toronto once. I remember the first time I went to Montreal, which is my first time in Canada. It was during hockey season, and I believe we were there for a bachelor party, which, many people from New York, I think, do. And great city, loved it there. But some of the locals told us, like, as far as what you do tonight, like say around 10 o'clock when the hockey game's over, it really depends on what happens in the Canadiens game, because that city goes as the Canadiens go. It'll be loud and raucous if they win, and be a little quieter and a little more downtrodden if they lose. And Toronto, great city as well. The fact that they basically have a whole country behind them, really, really cool. I think the ratings of this World Series should be fantastic based on the two cities, and I mean a whole country in Canada that'll be involved here. And yeah, to go back to the Maple Leafs, seeing Vladdy walk into Game 7 with that Austin Matthews Toronto Maple Leafs jersey, a guy that has not had much luck in his history of Game 7s. I think a lot of us were like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? And Matthews reciprocated by later in the night by wearing the Vladdy jersey to their game. But really cool to see everyone kind of in Toronto and around Toronto and in the country of Canada just kind of get around the Blue Jays and get on board here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw a funny meme that had something to do with what you're talking about before. And they were hypothetically showing up to a Stanley Cup final if the Dallas Stars made it. And a guy was wearing a Dak Prescott jersey to the game. So that's the equivalent that we're looking at here, just trying to trump all the bad juju that is. And maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs at this point, I mean, Austin Matthews had to be sitting back and saying, why would you do this to me? Because now the pressure was on, like if they would have lost Game 7 and they would have blamed it on the Maple Leafs somehow. So either way, it went well. And Toronto, and I also saw something funny too, not to continue to talk about the hockey piece, but how can you not tie it with the Maple Leafs and the media there? Some of the outlets over there have always discussed that maybe some of the team members or the organization has said it's hard to win in Toronto because of how much pressure it is from the media and how scrutinized they are. And they said, well, the same media is covering the Toronto Blue Jays team and they're doing just fine. So the pressure is different, of course, and it's the first time since 1993 that the Blue Jays will get a chance to hoist the Commissioner's Trophy.
Yeah, and how about the history that they've had there now? I believe it's four times in a deciding Game 7. They've had a 3-run homer or a 3 or more run homer, 7th inning or later in the game, something like that. You have this one obviously with George Springer, the famous Jose Bautista one. Joe Carter, Joe Carter was a Game 6. I'm not sure if that's included in this stat. And then Edwin Encarnacion, a little less known in the wild card game. Is the Carter one included in that, or was it just Game 7s? Am I missing one?
No, I think Carter was included because it was Encarnacion.
So it wasn't just Game 7s.
It was Jose Bautista. Obviously, George Springer adds to the fold, and the Joe Carter one to touch them all, Joe. You never hit a bigger home run in your life. And I mean, the George Springer one is going to age like fine wine. And that moment, of course, has broken the hearts of all of the Mariners fans out there. But just hearing all of the reactions, I know you sent me earlier in the day after the series ended, was that live crowd reaction without announcers and just hearing the crowd noise. And there was also someone who lives next to Rogers Center, where the delay was significant, 45 seconds to be exact. So the finish was completely spoiled on their end. But it literally sounded like an earthquake outside their window when you hear that the goal horn going off and all the Toronto fans celebrating. But baseball is meant to break your heart. We always talk about that. And on both sides, there's winners and losers. And I guess the thing you could pull away from this, and I was thinking about Brady Farkas, our good friend, Refuse to Lose podcast, covering the Seattle Mariners, is yes, it hurts a lot, but it means you care a lot. And this means something.
Yeah, before we go too far, we should have at least a brief conversation about the Seattle Mariners, because last time we were on here, I guess, was the night before Game 7. So we have not really said our piece about them. I mean, we have through social media a little bit, but not actually on the podcast. They're an interesting team to look at now for the future. Obviously, a fantastic season in Seattle, a little bit up and down. Remember, it wasn't like they sat in first place in the AL West all year. They had to climb their way back and then stay there. But obviously a lot of great stories, as close as they've ever come. And it wasn't just one game away. It was a few innings away. So as heartbreaking of a baseball moment as you can get for Mariners fans, I wouldn't be shocked if most of them would have a hard time even tuning in for the World Series. The ratings for the World Series might not be great in the area of Seattle. So I don't blame them, to be honest. This is a tough one. I think you might need to take a step away for a little while. And I got to say, looking at the future, I'd be at least a little concerned that they're a team that is set up for at least a little bit of regression next year. And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but when you think about it logically, Cal Raleigh, is he going to hit 60 home runs again? Probably not. I'm not saying he's going to hit 20, but I would assume he's more than likely going to come back down towards earth a little bit. They have several free agents that they have to make decisions on. Josh Naylor, in my opinion, the biggest one. I think they need him back in a Seattle Mariners uniform. The problem is, I think there's going to be a lot of teams that would be very, very interested in Josh Naylor. So we'll see how nasty the fight for him gets. Eugenio Suarez, I don't know if I'd try to get him back. Seattle doesn't seem to be his place offensively. I think he likes it there. I think the fans like him, but he doesn't seem to perform there all that well. He's now had 2 stints there in Seattle. So they've got some decisions. They have other ones as well. Those are 2 of the bigger ones. Listen, Julio Rodriguez is still going to be there. Cal Raleigh is still going to be there. All those pitchers are still going to be there. The rumors about maybe they'll trade from that strength, they happen every offseason. Maybe you trade one of these pitchers, try to get an offensive piece back, especially if you lose a guy like Naylor in free agency. Hopefully they don't. I'd like to see him back there personally. But they have some questions there. And then you look at the rest of the division, Texas with a new manager, maybe a new attitude. We'll see, because as you brought up a few episodes ago, they're still an interesting team to see if they're trying to cut some payroll. You hope that a Corey Seager's back there, but there's been little whispers of maybe they'd look to move a guy like that, save some money. The Astros are the Astros. Who knows what they end up doing, but they always seem to kind of, I don't know, put their foot in that door and keep it open at the last second. So we'll see. And obviously the Athletics, if they can ever get pitching, are an emerging threat. So I won't say a lot about the Angels, who also have a new manager, but I'm going to give the wait and see approach for that one. So the Mariners, you hope they can come back and just get right back into it. But there are some worries there that it might not be as easy as we hope for them to get back.
Yeah, that was my take on it too. You mentioned all the free agents. You can't forget about Jorge Polanco. I understand that,
right,
all those big hits he had in the postseason. This team will look different next year. Of course, you have the core being Raleigh and also Julio Rodriguez there, but the team, as always, looks different. It's a different group each year. And the one thing Mariners can hang their hats on, not that history always plays a part here, but if you remember the year 2000, Mariners go pretty far in the postseason. They go on to lose A-Rod to free agency. And then they have that historic 2001 season, winning 116 games plus, of course, not winning at all. But it shows that you can build on something. But again, 2001, the one recurring theme was you got Ichiro. I'm not sure who's out there. That's the equivalent of acquiring one of the best faces of a franchise in their history. But hope is out there. You can build on this. And I think the front office, and I think Brady was saying this when I listened to his eulogy of the season, that is, if the front office feels the burn that the fans felt, they will go and invest in this team. They'll get another arm. They'll fix the bench. Because honestly, the pieces were there for us to be previewing a Mariners-Dodgers World Series. That's the thing here. I mean, they were up 3-1 when Raleigh hit that home run. It felt like the momentum was all in Seattle's side, but as we all know, baseball, as I said before, is cruel. And watching George Springer hit that home run, I mean, it just changed everything. And here we are previewing the Toronto Blue Jays and the Los Angeles Dodgers, and a great season for the Mariners. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and Polanco, I believe, has an option, which is, I would think they want him back. I know it's funny because they brought him back last year. We talked about how fans were probably like, why are we bringing this guy back? And now this year they're going to be clamoring to make sure ownership brings him back. I'm pretty sure there's an option there, around $8 million for them to bring him back. To me, I would assume that's a no-brainer, but there are smarter people than I am to make that decision. And to go to what you said with like the bench and those kind of things, there was a staggering stat. We tweeted it. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me right now, but the basic point being made was one of the biggest differences in that series was if you look at the Blue Jays 6 through 9 hitters, the bottom third of their lineup, and you compare it to Seattle's 6 through 9, night and day. Toronto's 6 through 9, man, those dudes produced, and Seattle got almost nothing from their 6 through 9. 1 through 6, Seattle's hitters, believe it or not, actually outproduced the Blue Jays a little bit, not by enough to kind of make up for their bottom third, but that was big. And then obviously, before we move on from Seattle, the biggest talking point coming out of that game, and even during that game, you got to give the announcers credit because they were calling it out while it was happening in real time. They bring Bizzardo in to face Springer, who Springer had seen, I believe, just the night before, but I think it was the third time the Blue Jays were seeing him instead of a guy like Munoz or even a Matt Brash, and it goes poorly. Now, on Dan Wilson's side of things, as he said, that's been Bizzardo's role all year. Puts out some fires, has one of the best left on base percentage numbers on in the AL, but also maybe the best in that bullpen for Seattle. Has a high whiff rate, all those kind of things. There are reasons to go with him. I think the criticism of Wilson is it's not you can't use the analytics there. A lot of guys nowadays, especially in big games, will use your closer, not always in the ninth, but in the what seems like the most pivotal moment of the game. That certainly seemed like the most pivotal moment of the game. With that being said, I am not being quite as harsh as a lot of other people are being on Wilson. Do I think it was the right decision? Probably not. But I think there are a lot of other places you could point to where there are reasons they lost. Early in that game, they had Bieber on the ropes at one point early to put more runs on the board, and they couldn't get any across. So there's a lot of different ways you could look at it. Obviously, that's going to stand out because what happens next is the Springer home run, and that's what everybody will remember.
Yeah, no, I agree. And there's moments that they had the same situation where they had two guys on and they couldn't capitalize. I believe I remember Julio striking out in that exact situation. And eventually you have to look at the full fabric of the game to understand that the loss is not just built on the decision. I agree with you. I probably would have went to Munoz myself. I probably would have started the inning with Munoz or Spires instead of having Wu go out there and kind of get himself in trouble, where that's where the mess kind of started by putting Wu out there, who hasn't really pitched in a long time. We can assume he was throwing bullpen and getting his arm ready, but for the most part, that was the most pitches he's thrown in a couple of months. And at this point, we need to make sure he was ready, and to put him in that spot after he had that clean inning, just so all things unraveled. But it's a game of what if, and it's easy to have hindsight now and blame Dan Wilson, but he stood by the role of everyone here. And last time Brady was on this podcast, we talked about Bizzardo and him being a big piece of this bullpen. And yeah, he was acquired on the scrap heap essentially, but he was an essential piece to that bullpen of the reason why they were in a game 7, a game away from going to the World Series. So you can second guess it all you want, but a lot of broken hearts in Seattle, Washington.
Yeah, not easy to be a Mariners fan. I mean, I'm a Mets fan, and I know we have lots of money, but it's definitely not easy to be a Met fan either. Even these days, as we saw how this season ended. But I will say the Mariners have had some heartbreaking playoff moments over the years, and that's going to be one that they unfortunately never forget. But I will say, in a more positive spin, I am very excited about this matchup in the World Series.
No, I agree. And we have a huge slew of information to throw your guys' way. We're going to try to be here for about an hour and change here. If you guys are joining us live in the chat, we appreciate that. If you're listening on demand, please follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at TableSettersPod. Please leave a 5-star review. Tell your friends about what we're doing over here, talking all things baseball. We'll be continuing this journey. We started in March, of course, to give you guys the lay of the land for the 2025 season. We'll see it through the finale, and we are not stopping in the hot stove for the winter meetings, all of that. And eventually covering the WBC this year. A lot of exciting things on deck, but we have to get through this World Series first, which Devin mentioned starts this Friday. The Los Angeles Dodgers versus the Toronto Blue Jays at Rogers Center, 8 p.m. Eastern. And we have the Los Angeles Dodgers returning to the Fall Classic for the third time in 6 years. And at this point, Devin, they're considered, I mean, not just in baseball, they're sports' most consistent and self-sustaining powerhouse at this point. It's a decade-long run of success. And we talked about their roster management last week, their organizational depth, and there's been a culture of stability there where you really can't think of a parallel in other sports. This team just does it on a consistent basis. But opposite them is the Toronto Blue Jays. They're back on this stage for the first time, as we mentioned, since 1993. And this is the culmination of years developing from within. They're weathering near misses. We talk about heartbreak for the Mariners. There's been a lot of heartbreak for the Blue Jays fans as well. And they reshaped their identity into this team is pretty complete. And we'll talk about what their strength is and how they can beat this Dodger team. There's a lot of cohesion. And this is a team that no longer plays as a surprise of an upstart. I think A-Rod said it on the post game of Game 7, discussing how this is Goliath versus Goliath. This is a contender. They have a lot of confidence coming here, and they fully expect to be here. They're not just happy to be there. They want to be standing tall against this Dodger team, and I think they're going to give it all they got.
Yeah, I think it has the potential. You never know how a series is going to work out before it starts, because even the matchups that seem the best on paper sometimes end up being duds of a series. With that being said, I love what we're going into. These are lots of different storylines. I mean, the most obvious one that people started talking about right away is rust versus rest, right? So the Blue Jays are coming in here after winning a grueling 7-game series. The Dodgers are coming in here after lots of days off, after a sweep. Apparently that's happened, I want to say, 4 times before heading into a World Series, and the 7-game winner has won every single time. Do I buy into that and make anything of that? No, I do not. I think it's a fun stat to put out there. I think it's interesting. I don't necessarily think it tells us anything about what's going to happen. And the rust versus rest thing, I mean, we've talked about that in the beginning of the playoffs with the teams that get a bye. I think that whole thing about, the teams that are gotten byes are actually at a disadvantage, that's quieted way down, because we've got a lot of number 1 and 2 seeds, even this year, obviously, advancing. So people aren't talking about that. The Dodgers are just such a professional team. We heard Andrew Friedman respond to all the conversations about like Dodgers unfair advantage, buying the championships, all that kind of stuff. He responded saying something along the lines of like, our stars just work harder than your stars. And there have been other teams that have actually said that that's kind of true, that they get to the field and like Mookie Betts is out on the field hours before anyone else working on this or that. And Freddie Freeman or this guy, all this stuff, and that it is different. Like their stars are not acting necessarily like stars. They're acting like they have a job to do every single day, and they're trying to get better at something every single day. So maybe there is something to be said about that. The point is, I don't buy into the rest hurting them. I mean, they have their rotation perfectly set up. Once again, they've basically this postseason for them has been, for the most part, a breeze, other than 1 game against the Phillies. Right, the Reds didn't put up much of a fight, even though they scored some runs against the Dodgers. Wasn't much of a fight. The Phillies, we expect it to be, 5 games, go all the way to the end. Someone scores a TKO. It wasn't. The Dodgers were the better team pretty quickly. Obviously, they won in the Kirkering stuff. Milwaukee didn't really show up other than game 1. So they're coming in here, I don't want to say untested. That's probably a little too strong of a word, but they're feeling pretty good, man. They're not coming in here beat up, overworked. And I think for a team like the Dodgers, that's a good thing. If it was a less experienced team, I might say, I don't know if I like this rest. I would rather them coming in on a roll. On the other side of things, I love that the Blue Jays had to play 7. I think they're the team that could benefit. So I think both teams are set up very nicely. Obviously, Toronto has a little more wear and tear on them, but I don't necessarily think either one gets an advantage. Do you feel like rest or rust plays something here?
No, I don't. Only because this Dodgers team is built different. I think if this was another team that hasn't been there before, hasn't done this before, I think it probably would play a part, but they're a machine at this point. You mentioned they're really facing no adversity through this postseason, 9-1. I mean, at this point, they unsettle in efficiency. We talked about the Reds, swept them, defeated the Phillies in 4 games in the NLDS, and then swept the 97 win Brewers. like nothing in the NLCS. So they held Milwaukee to exactly 1 run in each contest. And I understand we talked about all the things about the Milwaukee offense, but this is still on the other half of it. The Dodgers were the ones that held them to that. So looking at what Blake Snell did, we'll talk about Yamamoto and Glasnow and Ohtani, of course. They have a combined ERA through the postseason of 1.40 across 66 innings. And the bullpen, we talked about being anchored by Roki and Alex Vesia. These guys went from the question mark they were to potentially a strength in their way. And I think it'll be an interesting conversation when we talk about the pitching of how you feel just about where this Dodgers bullpen has emerged. And I think on Toronto's side, you mentioned before, their bats have been elite. And everyone wants to talk about the scrappy team, but they've led the postseason in slugging percentage. They're hitting 296, reaching base at a 355 clip. They're slugging, like I said, at 523, which is better than the Dodgers, of course, a more sample size because they played 11 games, but they produced 71 runs, the most of any remaining playoff club. They've hit 20 home runs. They struck out only 64 times. So, of course, that goes with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I mean, that historic postseason, 6 home runs, 12 RBIs, 442 batting average. And then you got players like Ernie Clement. He's batting 429. Nathan Lucas. You talk about wins, all wins probability added. Nathan Lucas posted a plus 506, which is, we'll talk about WPA and all that stuff. There's a lot of stats you dive into that this is not this underdog story that everyone wants to talk about, this little engine that could. This is a really well-rounded offense. And if you haven't been paying attention to the Blue Jays and taking them for granted, this is a team that was tested. And I think that is a conversation about rest versus rust. But I think this Blue Jays team went to the brink and came back because easily they lost those games against the Mariners. Everyone wrote them off. They were celebrating in the Pacific Northwest thinking it was over. They had a perseverance trail, and then they turned it into offensive dominance. I mean, obviously the ALDS, they dispatched the Yankees pretty much 4 games. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Trey Savage, like you look at those numbers, they destroyed the Yankees. But in the American League Championship Series, they went down 2-0 and then later 3-2. They mounted the comeback at home. And I think that resolve results in something. I think having that in your corner of knowing that you looked over the edge about being pushed over and being there, I mean, I think that does add a little bit of something to this series where, again, if this was not the Dodgers, I would say that Toronto has I would say the momentum, but the Dodgers are the Dodgers. So
yeah,
I think that Toronto is coming in as hot as you can and feeling really, really good. And like we said before, we should have opened with it. Ohtani is finally on a jet to Toronto, and it's finally happened.
Yes, and that joke has been tweeted by myself and about 1 million other people. But it's a good one, so we were going to beat it to death as much as possible. Here's the thing. Like you said, the Blue Jays are not the little engine that could. I know we're not used to seeing them here, but they spend a lot of money. They've been trying to throw their money around. I believe they're like 5th highest spending team out there. So not quite Dodger level, but no one feels bad for them, right? No one's trying to take money out of their pocket or change out of their pocket and throw it the Toronto Blue Jays direction. I will say, like, this is now back-to-back years. Teams have been rewarded for giving a player the big contract, right? The same year that the Dodgers give Ohtani that $700 million deal, which is now paid for itself, apparently, they make the World Series and win it. The Blue Jays lock up Vladdy with the $500 million deal, which raised many eyebrows. I know it raised mine. I did not see this coming. I wasn't as down on the Blue Jays as a lot of people were. I did have them making the playoffs this year in my preseason predictions, but I didn't have them making a long run. And I was very skeptical about giving a first baseman $500 million and double-digit years. Now, obviously, he's changed my mind a little bit. I still don't know how that's going to age, but he is a young dude. So, I mean, what I've seen from him has been unbelievable. One of my favorite stats for Vladdy, and I tweeted this out. You know what? Sometimes you tweet things out and you're like, man, this is such a good tweet. This is going to get so much love. And then it just disappears into the ether and gets buried. And this is one that didn't get much attention that I was really a fan of. So his strikeout rate, we talk so much about contact rate, as we should, for the Blue Jays. But a good point being made here is that they're not just putting the ball in play like rinky-dink, like here we go, swinging bunt. They're also slugging the crap out of the ball. I mean, the mix of things, the bat speed that they have shown has been crazy. David Popkins, their hitting coach, I said, I wonder if he gets any attention from these teams looking for a manager. What he has done with this squad has been unbelievable. Super, super quick. But anyway, to get back to the stat I was going to, Vladdy's strikeout percentage in the regular season was 13.8%. Really, really good. In high leverage situations, 3.2%, best in the league. He cuts his strikeout rate down to 3.2% in high leverage situations. He's a slugger with an old school mentality of, I still want to put the ball in play, two-strike approach, level swing. If you look at his launch angles on his hits, they're not like these Riley Green ridiculous uppercuts that are going to result in a million strikeouts when you miss. 3.2% in high leverage situations, and in the postseason, 5.9%, which is second lowest with anyone with at least 30 at bats. The best is his teammate Ernie Clement, so he's the only guy that's doing a little better in the strikeout department percentage wise than Vladdy. I just love the approach, and honestly, it's offensively, the Dodgers obviously have the sexier names 1 through 9. You got Shohei and Freddie and Max Muncy and Mookie Betts and all these guys in the same lineup. Whereas the Blue Jays, it's Vladdy, it's George Springer, who is a postseason legend at this point. But it's also the guys of like Ernie Clement, Nathan Lucas, like you said, the guys that are not super heralded or at least weren't before this playoff run. But I do believe it's strength versus strength offensively. I think both of these teams can really hit. They're smart up there. They're disciplined when they need to be. I think that could be a real show. The pitching side is a different conversation in my mind, but offensively, I think the Blue Jays can hold their weight against the Dodgers.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen from Vlad, you mentioned him being more strategic, and I think that's been really well versed here because he's always hit the ball hard. We've all known that about him, but this October he's been selective. He's waiting for mistakes and he's punishing them, and nearly half of his postseason hits have come with 2 strikes, which is obviously an indicator of he's comfortable in there. He feels like he's in control. And the other thing about this offense, and I do want to talk a little bit about their contact, looking through and pouring through stats as we were getting ready for this episode, because we've had a day or so to really know this matchup, the Blue Jays have scored nearly 2/3 of the innings that they played in which they have placed a runner in scoring position, which shows, I mean, this is an offense that, as we mentioned, they're not a little under the hood. They're efficient, but they also have statistical variance where they're able to get there and thrive in the middle over of games. So innings 4 through 7, when opposing starters begin to tire, their command starts to kind of go a little bit. Their contact quality rises as the counts start to lengthen, and then their chase rate remains among the lowest of any team in the postseason, which I think will play a part here. And we'll talk about paths to victory in this series. That's what these other teams in the NL didn't do to the Dodgers. The Dodgers starters went out there and they dominated. You never really got to see a variance of the different arms. And by the time you blinked, the game was over. Yamamoto never left the game. So I think this is going to be a big thing for the Blue Jays. And if you look at some of the other numbers, they've hit 296 as a team. They have an 878 OPS, which is the best postseason offensive output by any club since the 2019 Nationals, when they made their run to the title. So there's some stats here that support that this team could go on a run and beat this Dodgers team. And I don't think it's streaky. I don't think it's luck. I think they have come from a system that wears down pitches one pitch at a time. And I think this Blue Jays team has shown that they're built to put sustained pressure on the other side. And we'll talk about the other pieces, but I think that's a big thing we need to discuss is that offensively, this is a well-versed team. And if they start hitting for power and continue it, and Vlad's going to continue to do what he does, they have every bit of a chance in the series. And I don't think people should be taking them lightly.
No, I don't think so either. The other interesting thing to look at is, we talked a little bit about how they got here. Both teams have faced some really good pitchers, but the Blue Jays have faced really good pitching more recently, right? The Dodgers, when they face the Reds, I mean, you're facing the Hunter Greens of the world. That's not fun. I mean, they beat them up, but that's an electric pitcher to face. And when you go to face Philly, you face some really good pitching. It certainly wasn't the Phillies pitchers' fault that they didn't go further in that series or put up a better performance. Christopher Sanchez, Jesus Luzardo, we talked a lot in the episodes when that was going on of how good they were. So the Dodgers did face that good pitching. Toronto has faced really good pitching more recently. I'm not going to sit here and say the Dodgers faced really good pitching in Milwaukee. Yes, you face Freddie Peralta. I think the Dodgers have Peralta's number a little bit. You face the Miz in short stints. Other than that, you faced Aaron Ashby a lot. Not to drag Aaron Ashby's name through the mud, but and guys like Milwaukee's pitching is good, but they weren't performing very well. So I give a little bit of an advantage in that way to Toronto, having seen some really good pitching recently and fight through it with their same approach that has worked against everybody. So the Dodgers being rested, maybe in that department, maybe they come a little slow out of the gate offensively. and that favors Toronto at home. If you're a Toronto fan, that's what you have to hope a little bit there.
Yeah, and I think the challenge against Los Angeles for the Blue Jays will be maintaining their same style against the deepest pitching staff in the support, especially how they're performing now through October. And because the Dodgers right now, 1 through 4 of this rotation that they're going to throw out there, they're equipped to suppress rhythm. We discussed that before, where you can't really get anything in place because by the time you start to get a little bit of a rally, it's just extinguished. So obviously the starters throw strikes at a league best rate. The Dodgers have done that all postseason, and their bullpen allows almost no inherited runners to score. So they're not giving up these second chances that the Blue Jays were capitalizing against some of the errors we saw on the Mariners side. Obviously, the Yankees giving them shots here. And I think for Toronto, they have to extend the counts early. They have to attack the mistakes late and make the Dodgers rotation work beyond the efficiency we saw through those first couple of rounds from the Dodgers. Because if it is the quick innings we were seeing, empty aggression, we're not seeing the same approach. I mean, the early base traffic will be a jarring thing for these Dodgers pitchers because we're not really seeing that from them. So to have some adversity in game one, Rogers Center, you see some of the approach is different. I think getting all those guys on base and crowding the bases and putting some pressure on them early could set the tone for this team that it's not going to be a walk through the park. And that might unsettle them enough to get game one, maybe get game two, and then head to LA up 2-0. And then who knows what happens.
I mean, if they head to LA 2-0, I'm going to be very confident in the Blue Jays at that point. But you're right. I mean, you look at the keys to the series, and you look at the defensive stuff, kind of like you alluded to, the Dodgers really haven't been tested defensively because they're striking out like double digit dudes like every night. So the ball's not in play all that much. Toronto, we know, is excellent defensively, and we've seen them test. So we've seen them turn huge double plays, make big plays. So I'm not really worried about their defense at all. That does lead into a story that I will get to in a little bit with someone that's returning. But before I go too far, kind of adding on to what you said, when we talk about the keys to the series, my number one key for the Blue Jays is they need to be getting the LA starting pitchers, out before the 7th inning. And I don't think that's asking too much. That still might be quality starts for these Dodgers. But we need the Toronto needs the bridge to Sasaki to be a little longer. If it's starting pitcher and maybe one reliever and then Sasaki, and then sometimes no relievers and then Sasaki, they're in trouble. Although I will say Toronto hits velocity pretty damn well. All right, so like Roki at the end, maybe Toronto's not as phased by him as some of these other teams. But if you can get the Blake Trinans of the world to have more work, and the Alex Vessias, and then even go further, like get Emmett Sheehan in there, who I love, but like, again, he hasn't come out of the bullpen in big situations all that much. Get these other guys in there to have some work, lengthen the games, lengthen the series, and then see what it is, because we know the only Achilles heel of the Los Angeles Dodgers is the bullpen. That's no secret. Everyone knows it. But in Milwaukee, we didn't have to really see it. And even the little bit of it that we did see some moments where, you know, in that game one, Blake Trinan having to come in when Sasaki was shaky, it almost got to them there. So I think that's the number one key for them. And then I will say for the Jays, in pitching wise, the left-handed relief pitchers worry me a little bit for Toronto. When you look at the Dodgers lineup, having the Shoheis of the world, Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy, these great left-handed hitters, you need some relievers, because I don't look at the Toronto pitching staff and think, oh, they're going to go deep into the game every night. Toronto is going to need to use their bullpen, I think, much more than LA will need to. I don't think Toronto's rotation is poor by any means, but I don't think a lot of these guys are going to be going a third time through the LA lineup. You might see it once or twice. I don't expect to see it all that much. I hope I'm wrong, because I like starters going deep, but the left-handed relievers, the Eric Lauers of the world, the Littles of the world, who we know had some bad moments recently in the playoffs. I always get this name wrong, but Fluharty. I can never pronounce it.
Looks like Flaherty, but they had an extra vowel in there over there.
Right. There's a U in there. So those guys are going to have to step up. That makes me a little nervous. Those are my keys for Toronto. And I will say, we'll just put this name out there, and then we can get to it when we get to it. I just don't want to forget it. When I talk about the defensive stuff and not being worried about Toronto, there might be something mixed in there named Bo Bichette, who I think is a great thing for the Blue Jays. But defensively, this is going to be interesting to see where he is. He has to be in the lineup. I don't buy the AJ Przinsky arguments that he should be a bench bat To me, that's crazy. This guy is one of the best hitters in Major League Baseball. Look at the stats this year. Was amazing in high leverage situations, in runners in scoring position situations. Fantastic. Go look at it. This guy was incredible. So you do not leave him on the bench and get him one at bat a game. But defensively, shortstop, he's not good. Look at the metrics. He's worse than Anthony Volpe. If you think Anthony Volpe is the worst, Bo Bichette is worse than he is. Okay, so the conversation is he DHing? And if he's DHing, that means Springer is playing the outfield, who's not a, look at the outs above average for George Springer in the outfield nowadays. Not great. He's in the negative. He's not the worst, but he's in the negative for sure. And then that moves Addison Barger maybe to third base, and Nathan Lucas plays either left or right. Springer usually I would think would play right. I don't know. Maybe he plays left. There's some juggling you have to do there with the defense. The point is, Jimenez has been fantastic at shortstop, and he's hit a couple home runs. So I think a lot of Blue Jay fans are sitting there like, we want Bo back, but it's nice to have that defense at shortstop.
Want to give a shout out to Bird Talks Ball in the chat here. He has a lot of good stuff he's saying here, but he said Roki has been incredible this postseason. My favorite non-Philly. Of course, Nick is a Philadelphia Phillies fan in the chat, always supporting table sets. So we appreciate you, Nick, greatly. To talk a little bit about what you're talking about with the Toronto strengths and extending at bats. If you look at some of the other numbers, Toronto has averaged 4.06 pitches per plate appearance in games they've won compared to 3.72 in losses. So obviously the difference is only a third of a pitch. So you're saying what? Big deal. But it's the margin between forcing an early mound visit or maybe facing Blake Snell into the 7th or the 8th. Yeah. Their bottom third of the order is going to be key of that. Obviously, Varsho, Kirk, we mentioned Ernie Clement. They have to be essential in this. And I think when that group reaches base, their offense becomes circular. And I think they're not relying on the big bats in the middle, which they've done. That is the winning formula. And I believe the Blue Jays cannot win this series trading haymakers with the Dodgers. They can't. I don't think that they can go there just expecting to trade blow for blow. They have to control the offense, because if you get down early and then you're facing one of these starters the way they've been pitching, yes, you can catch them. We saw Yamamoto get clipped by the Phillies, but there's not a lot of success in that, and you want this crowd to be in it. So going down early is not a good thing, especially when you have these other heavy hitters on the mound. I think the Blue Jays obviously have to lean on their strengths, and their lineup has hit 293 against pitches outside the strike zone this postseason, which to me is staggering because it illustrates both their back control and their ability to spoil the high quality pitches. We saw again firsthand against the Yankees that you couldn't get these guys out. So against the Dodgers staff, we look at them, they rank among the league's best in first pitch strike percentage. They will need to choose when to expand and when to resist that. And their best innings often come when they push starters past 80 pitches before the 5th inning. If you look at some of those stats here, they will need to retain that formula. So solo home runs and late rallies are not going to be enough against a team that has only allowed 15 total runs this postseason. So they're going to have to get guys on base and score them. I think pressure must come early. And like I said before, it has to come from the bottom of the lineup. Of course, you want Vladdy and those guys to hit, but the only way this goes in the Blue Jays' favor is if it is a circular lineup where everybody is contributing, like we saw in the first couple of rounds of this postseason.
Yeah, but there's reason to be confident in that, because that we've seen it. Now, obviously, this pitching staff is the best you're going to see, to me, when they're healthy, the best in baseball. The Dodgers, that is, starting with Blake Snell, Yamamoto, Tyler Glasnow, and Shohei Ohtani. It's incredible to have all those guys there and be able to use a guy like Kershaw in relief, even though he's not really good in relief. It just shows you the length of that rotation. But I do believe that they're going to test this pitching staff, the Blue Jays, that is, are going to test the pitching staff of the Dodgers more than anyone has this year. The Blake Snell matchup right away in game 1 is so interesting to me, because forever we've thought of Blake Snell as an electric pitcher who can't go deep into games and walks too many guys. And all of a sudden, like, he's putting that aside and just going deep, not walking dudes. The Blue Jays are the team that can bring that back out in him. Like you said, lengthen those at bats and cause him to walk some dudes and then make him pay. Or at the very least, if you don't put up a bunch of runs on him, you get him out in the middle of the 6th inning or something like that, like we used to see from Blake Snell constantly. I mean, you look at his numbers against the Blue Jays, or the Blue Jays' numbers against him. Collectively, the current Blue Jays have hit 227 off of him, only slugged 303, so they don't have a lot of success here. I mean, Vladdy, 2 for 11 in his career with a double. Only 1 strikeout in typical Vlad fashion there. Alejandro Kirk, 3 for 5, so some success. Springer, 5 for 22 with a home run, 3 RBIs, couple walks. I mean, there's not a lot there. It's a small sample size, 66 total at bats. For me, like collectively, that's a pretty small sample size. But I do think it's going to be fascinating to see if they can bring the old Blake Snell out of, all right, we might not score a bunch against you because we'll get a couple on and then you'll strike us out and keep us off, off the scoreboard, but we're going to get you out of here in the sixth inning. That'll be an interesting thing to watch.
And I'm also curious your thoughts on this. Obviously, statistically, you want to score the first run. And it does loom large, but looking at both of the Jays and the Dodgers, they are undefeated this postseason when scoring first. What are your thoughts on that? Does that loom large? Of course, the Dodgers dominated Milwaukee, but this sets the tone. And obviously, something has to give. Both these teams can't sit there and hope that goes the distance. But for Toronto, as I mentioned before, scoring early forces LA to a little bit less flexibility in the way they do things. And for the Dodgers, getting ahead takes the crowd out of it, especially when they're at home, and also kind of sets it up where you get the precision of Toronto's bullpen, which, let's be honest, I mean, they've been good. We saw Jeff Hoffman get the last out, but would you trust them down the line? You want these starters to go deeper than you've asked them to go. Gausman has to go deep. You're going to expect Trey Savage to go a little bit deeper. You don't really want to rely on the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been shy about it. I'm not a big fan, not a huge fan of the bullpen Toronto. Like at this stage in the season, I think if you give me all 30 teams and say, hey, do you like this bullpen? I'd probably be like, yeah, I like it just fine compared to a lot of the other messes that we're going to get. But when you're down to two and you're against the mighty Dodgers, I'm a little scared. I was scared of the bullpen against Seattle, to be honest. With that being said, they performed pretty well. Jeff Hoffman has looked fantastic. He really has. And to be fair, he did look really good down the stretch of the regular season. There was just like a nice chunk of months there in the middle of the season where it's like, this dude is not working out. But it looks like he is fully confident. With that being said, you don't want to have to get into the Toronto bullpen early every single game. You do need some of these guys to give you length. Kevin Gausman's the guy I look at. He has a lot of experience against these Dodgers. You got to remember he had a stint in San Francisco. So some of these at bat numbers, he's faced a few of these guys a nice number. I mean, no one more than Mookie Betts. You got to remember he's probably faced him in multiple divisions in his experience. So Betts has 51 at bats against Gausman, 16 hits. So he's hitting 314 off from 3 home runs, 8 RBIs, only struck out 6 times in 51 at bats. So Mookie's pretty comfortable against him, but I don't mind the numbers I'm looking at when I look at the rest of this roster. Tommy Edman, 2 for 13, 8 strikeouts. Freddie Freeman, only 1 for 9. By the way, maybe you can pull this up while I finish talking about this. Freddie Freeman's numbers in Toronto, or maybe it's just Canada. Oh, no, it's got to be Toronto nowadays. I believe he has incredible numbers in Toronto. Now, I'm not sure if he's from Canada or his family just has history in Canada, but he has some roots there. And I believe he absolutely destroys the ball when he visits Toronto. But I'll just keep this up. So Freddie Freeman, only 1 for 9 against Gausman. Kike Hernandez, 1 for 14, 7 strikeouts. Teoscar Hernandez, 3 for 16, 5 strikeouts. Max Muncy, pretty good, actually. 6 for 18, 3 home runs. So there's a couple guys so far. Mookie, Muncy, very comfortable against Gausman. Shohei, only 2 for 12, of course with a home run, but also 6 strikeouts. So like a lot of those dudes, Will Smith, 2 for 10, have not been great against Gausman. That gives me hope. If you're a Toronto fan, that Gausman can go out there game 1 and save the bullpen a little bit. Give me 6. Give me 6 in game 1. Keep us in the game. And I think you'll be pretty happy with that.
So I'm looking at Freddie Freeman. He has a career 357 batting average and a 439 on base and a 750 slugging in 14 games at Rogers Center. 6 home runs, 17 RBIs. Yeah, so this is a guy who hits really well in Toronto. The other thing too, and we're seeing a lot of the expert and market view from a betting perspective, look at the odds makers. They have the Dodgers as narrow favorites. So if you ask the novice baseball fan about where this is, there's hovering between, depending on what book you're using, minus 130, minus 140 on the money line, which translates to roughly 55 to 60% implied win probability for the Dodgers. And looking at some of the projection models, they're not as influenced by the Dodgers going the distance and maybe winning. And I'll tell you in a second. So the Fangraphs simulations give LA a 58% chance to win the series, but go to Pagoda. They're leaning slightly towards Toronto when adjusting for offensive performance against right-handing pitching. So 538, which is the ELO-based projections they use, they're pretty tighter. They call it a coin flip once home field advantage and rest disparities are factored in. The numbers agree on 1 point. Really, there's no clear mismatch. So You look at some of the analyst consensus, they're equally split as well. So many national voices have sided with the Dodgers' ability to impose the pace, as we mentioned before. But others see the Blue Jays lineup, like we're talking about before, who hit nearly 300 this postseason, as the favorite. So David Ortiz talked about this before. I mentioned the A-Rod comment about Goliath versus Goliath, but David Ortiz is really, really positive towards the Blue Jays as well. And he said, quote, Toronto just hits mistakes. When a team has to fly cross country after a week off, that can show up early. I don't think this is one-sided at all. Do you think the travel plays any part of this? I know Ohtani on a jet was the joke, but they've been off, dude. Like it's not like they're flying coach and they have to sit and, not have any leg room. Is this a problem at all? Or is it is it just trying to make stories of the days off?
I think it's trying to make stories of the days off. This is as professional of a ball club as you get, and honestly, on both sides. No, I don't think the travel plays a whole lot. I mean, the adrenaline that is going to be running through these dudes' bodies for this series, I think will take care of most of that. I don't know. It's the end of the season, man. They can see the finish line. I just don't buy into that because it's going to work both ways. So if anything, it's going to even out.
And I also, looking at the lineup dynamics, you mentioned potentially Bo Bichette and where he fits. We don't have
Yep.
full word yet that he's coming back from the knee injury quite yet, right? That's not official as of right now,
It's
right?
not official. I don't think they've released the rosters. They don't usually do that this early. We just know the quotes that we've heard of like "I'm good to go" or whatever it was when reporters asked him. Obviously, that's still a decision that they can make, and John Schneider and the front office can make. And by the way, shout out to John Schneider, man. Like, what a job this dude has done. I said before, so I'm a University of Delaware grad alum long time ago, but he was even further along than I was. But to see a guy like that go from the University of Delaware to managing the Blue Jays and now visiting the World Series. He is, and Nick might know this if he's still watching. I believe the first Delaware alum since Dallas Green bringing the Phillies to the World Series, like turned manager. There might have been some players, I'm not sure, but Dallas Green has the University of Delaware background too, and I believe was a part of the Phillies at one point as manager when successful. So good stuff there. But yeah, I mean, the Blue Jays, man, the Bichette stuff, I think if he's saying he's healthy, I mean, I did see him run the bases again. Remember before the ALCS, we saw him run the bases and pull up lame kind of after second base, or not really pull up lame, just look uncomfortable, like he retweaked the knee. I saw more video of him running the bases again, getting all the way to third, going very slowly, very gingerly, probably just trying to be careful. But apparently he said like 4 days ago is when he started feeling like he could really play. So that makes me feel like he's in the clear. It's not like, oh, we won the ALCS. I've been in a lot of pain, but I'm just going to say I'm good now because I want to play in the World Series. It sounds like he's been progressing and he'll be ready to go. But it does bring a lot of interesting questions up as far as where in the lineup, where is he playing in the field? Is he playing in the field at all? If not, who does that move around?
I think looking at some of this, the lineup, we know what the Dodgers bring to the table. You mentioned the names, the Shoheis of the world, Max Muncy, Mookie Betts. So we don't need to sit here and preview what they've done. But looking at some of just their lineup, just for this postseason, they're averaging 4.23 pitches per plate appearance, which is the third highest mark in the major leagues for the regular season as well, and the highest among postseason teams that are still here. And then looking at the Blue Jays side of things, 3.86 pitches per plate appearance was nearly half fewer than LA. And you can't have that. You have to make these pitchers go a little bit deeper in counts. Obviously, you want them to still have the approach of swinging early in counts, and they hit 317 on first and second pitches this postseason. But the same thing, you don't want to get early outs. We saw the Brewers fall into that rhythm of all of a sudden you throw 5 pitches and the inning's over. You can't have that. So it's this delicate balance that John Snyder has to motivate these guys of understanding the approach might be what has worked all season, because a 296 team average was the swinging early in count for them, leads all playoff clubs. They have been a machine offensively, but at the same time, you have to recognize and respect this pitching rotation of the Dodgers, where you don't want to be lulled into all of a sudden it's the 4th inning and you're only through the lineup twice. Like you want to make sure that we're sitting here and understanding that this heart of Toronto's lineup has to do their thing. But as I mentioned before, the circular nature of it, of getting on base and at least challenging them to throw more pitches, because that's what the Brewers didn't do. Maybe it was because the power was turned out for that team and the lights had turned out or whatever it was. But even the Phillies had a hard time outside of the Yamamoto thing. They really had a hard time challenging really the rotation anyway? Is it that they're dominant or the approach is not working? It's this conversation they're probably having right now with the Blue Jays and all their meetings of talking about the approach. You have to make these pitchers work a little bit more than they have.
And like just to kind of put it all in one neat package. Toronto led the majors in contact percentage, as we've mentioned here, 80.5%, and the Dodgers in the playoffs have led in whiff rate, 39.4%. So it's which one is going to give? Which one's going to give? Is the contact rate going to suffer because of these fantastic pitchers, or is the whiff rate going to suffer for the Dodgers because of this amazing approach of Toronto? And you're going to see them pitch less innings and the bullpen have to work more. That's the key. But we should talk more also. Like, we're almost talking right now about like, this is what the Blue Jays have to do to take down LA because LA is at the top. But LA's got to earn this one. They don't just stay champions because they won last year. So like, to talk about some of the keys for them, I think Toronto is going to be very picky as far as when they pitch to some of these guys, mostly the Shoheis of the world, but also the Mookie Betts of the world in certain situations, and also Freddie Freeman in certain situations. Obviously, you can't pitch around all of them all the time, but I think they're going to be pretty selective here. So one of my keys for the Dodgers is when a guy does get pitched around, the next man is going to need to make the Blue Jays pay. And we know that Mookie Betts does that very well. He's one person who does that very well, but there may be some other guys in other places in the lineup that are going to have to step up and do that as well, because I think at this point the Blue Jays will be pretty selective in that situation. And then to kind of basically just say the opposite of what we said for the Blue Jays is an obvious one. I think the starting pitchers need to once again shorten the game so the bullpen doesn't get exposed. But to me, those are the two keys for LA.
Yeah, and looking at some of the stuff, we mentioned the rotation being as dominant as they are. And I think we need to put some of those numbers in context in a second. But as we discussed in the other side of it, if you look at the Dodgers pitching staff, they've only faced 12 plate appearances with runners in scoring position this postseason. It almost seems implausible. That number seems insane, but it also underscores the efficiency we've seen of them getting to this level. And they're not just dominating. I think they're just preventing runs at a high level. And if the Blue Jays consider, I know we're talking about the Dodgers being successful. If the Blue Jays upset that rhythm, it could really shake them up a little bit. And I think LA really, for not facing adversity, I understand that one game with Philly, all of that, but they really have kind of walked to the spot and they've dominated, and that's on their doing. Of course, they've earned that. But I think the equilibrium for them might be a little bit off if you start to you talk about a boxing match, you just punch them really hard and you kind of shake them up. They're seeing a little bit of stars. I think you have to do that for them. But if you have LA with this formula of what we've seen, it could be a quick series. If they go in there and this rotation dominates like they were, I mean, the best antidote for offense is pitching, and good pitching beats good offense every single time. But we shall see how that angles out, because as you said, contact rate and whiff rate, something has to give.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, we need to put at least a little bit of love on the Blue Jays rotation. Like, it's not a bunch of nobodies. Kevin Gausman, we know, I mean, he's an all-star caliber pitcher. At his best, he can be fantastic. And he's been pretty good lately. So there's some hope there. Trey Savage is unreal when he's going. I mean, we've seen him in just a few starts here, but that splitter is one of the best pitches in baseball already. The ascent he has made in one single season. I said it the other day on Twitter. We may never see it again in our lifetime, to go from A ball after being drafted to the World Series, like in 1 year's time. That's incredible. I know a Philly fan reminded me that Ryan Kerkering in 2023 actually almost achieved that, which I actually had quickly forgotten, but they stopped just short of the World Series. So maybe it will happen again, because people do seem to, make those jumps quicker nowadays, as we've talked about a lot. But you got the Gausmans of the world, you got the Shane Biebers of the world that have been around the block and are all-star caliber guys, Cy Young caliber guys, you could even say. So Max Scherzer, we know he has the fight left in him. If he's going to pitch a game 4, which we'll see what their strategy is when they get deeper in the series, but do you feel good about that? I know he was great in the ALCS, which kind of shocked all of us. I don't know if I feel great about that against the Dodgers, but they do have the ability. These guys have been there, done that, other than Savage, and Savage is a phenom. So they have some good things on their side as well. But you're right, man. This LA rotation, with how they are looking right now, seems like they have the ability to shut anyone down. So you're right. You're hoping, as a baseball fan, that the Blue Jays let them know quickly that no, you're in for a fight here. You get punched in the mouth a few times, like you're in for a fight. The Blue Jays, I don't think are going to throw a knockout punch quickly. If there's one team that is more capable of throwing a knockout quicker, it's the Dodgers. But I don't see the Blue Jays as a team that's not going to fight back, man. Like, even if they go down like they did against Seattle, there's something about that offense, man, that just doesn't, it just seems like you're not going to keep them down all that long. And the belief they have in themselves, which starts with Vladdy and seems to trickle down, I think is as high as any team in the majors.
Yeah, and I think what Trey Savage brings to the table, I mean, he, like you mentioned, the poise we've seen, a rookie, he has startling composure for what he's been able to do. 11 strikeout, 1 walk performance in game 2 of the ALDS against the Yankees. I think that was emblematic of what he can bring to the table. You got that riding four-seamer that attacks above the barrel and a slider that, I mean, the tilt has been the finishing pitch. And I think what separates Savage from the most rookies we've seen in this spot, of course, you don't see a lot of them, is that the stuff doesn't shrink under pressure. I think he's been aggressive in leverage counts rather than conservative. And I would like to see him challenge more of the Dodgers plate discipline. And obviously the Dodgers, we talked about before, they do not expand the zone and they rarely miss mistakes. So he'll be challenged here. They're not going to be fooled by the pitches. And of course, now you have the other piece of this where we've seen Savage pitch a few times. And obviously the Yankees didn't have anything to look at. These other teams have the tape to study. And I think the Dodgers are students of the game. So we have Sam in the chat here. He says, I hope those metrics have some merit. I just do not see the Jays starters keeping it close in early innings to exploit the champs bullpen. We shall see. That's what it's all about. I mean, something has to give. These advanced metrics are just what they are. They're metrics, but the game has to be played in the field.
Yeah, man. These are two teams that are playing at their peak right now. And again, I'll go back to what we said kind of early in the episode. I do not think this is an obvious Dodgers win. I think this is as tested as they're going to be. I agree a little bit that the Blue Jays pitching is the concern if you're cheering for the Blue Jays here, but I believe in them enough. This is all I'm saying. I believe in them enough to keep it close enough for that offense to do what they've been doing, and that's make noise. And I don't know. There's something about this series coming up that I just feel like expect the unexpected.
Yeah, and I think defense will play a part. I think both these teams have been pretty solid defensively. It's not going to loom as large when you have, I mean, I think it was pretty obvious that the Blue Jays were a better defensive team than the Mariners. We saw that play a part in, I believe it was game 6, right? Game 6 where the defense fell apart for the Mariners. So run prevention does define this point of the season. And it doesn't always come for the pitcher's hand. I think both LA and Toronto fielded elite defenses in 2025. But for the Dodgers, they operate as one of the more analytically optimized defensive teams. We talked about the advanced position models they have. They have live batted ball tracking. They really know where to be. That's the other thing. The results have been pretty measurable. LA finished the regular season with plus 47 defensive runs saved, and they ranked in the top 5 of outs above average. So they've used the shifts, being precise with that. Their outfield reads are immediate. You watch them where they're supposed to be. And clearly they're internally communicating about knowing where these balls are going to be batted. So I think the Dodgers rotation, you talk about what they bring to the table. If they're not striking guys out, they're generating a lot of weak contact, the soft liners, the roll grounders, the flared fly balls. And the defense is rarely caught guessing. I think watching them being stabilizing with that, I think posting positive defensive metrics at both where you are and understanding the next where the ball is going to be batted does help a lot. So I think the defense on the Blue Jay side has loomed large. I mean, against the Yankees, we talked about it when we were previewing the series that they have been steady. I mean, obviously they lack the flash of LA's model, but I think they rarely make mistakes. They've been a defensive identity. They've been precise, consistent, 992 fielding percentage, the second best in baseball, and one of the lowest error totals of a playoff team. So this is a team that doesn't make mistakes. So they're not going to give you extra outs. So I think Dalton Varsho has been really the anchor, ranking the league leaders in outfield assists. They save runs with direct routes, and his throw mechanics are there as well. So this is a defense that is well matched on both sides. I don't know if defense is going to be the factor on either side. They both play pretty well on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I think they're going to hold their own there, but it is the kind of thing where you got two good defenses. First one that makes a big mistake, maybe that does make a big difference in the series, like an unexpected mistake there. I just want to say one other thing about the pitching here before we want to move on. Looking at the left on base percentage statistic, which is one of my favorite, looking at a pitching staff, who can get out of trouble, basically, is what that tells me. In the playoffs, it's been very similar numbers, both in the 70 percentile for 70 something percent. And then so I looked at the regular season to see if they are further apart at all, and they're very close there too. So for the season, the Toronto pitching 73.4% left on base percentage, which was good for 11th in the league. All right, so not elite at it, but they're pretty decent. And then the Dodgers just a little bit behind them, 73.2%, which was technically 14th in the league, but there's some ties there that actually moved that number up. So again, kind of middle of the pack or upper middle of the pack for these pitching staffs, and that's pitching as a whole, not just the bullpen, of being able to get out of trouble. I know Blake Snell has always, as I alluded to before, been fantastic at getting out of trouble because he's always struggled with walks, but he's able to keep the earned run average down because he gets out of those situations. So yeah, I mean, to go to the bullpens, I think what I want to see as a fan, just as a fan, is I want to see Dave Roberts have to make some difficult decisions with the bullpen usage, or whether to keep a guy in or bring him out, because you guys know me. I try not to be biased here, but there are some teams or some people that I admit to you that I'm just not a big fan of. We make jokes about how I like to rag on the Cardinals and all that kind of stuff. As a Met fan, we have some bad history against them. Dave Roberts is another guy that just rubs me the wrong way. I don't think I've made that a secret. Listen, it is always difficult to truly assess a manager of a team that is a juggernaut. How good of a manager are they? I remember all those years growing up in the 90s, Phil Jackson and the Bulls. Like, how much credit do you give to Phil Jackson? And then, okay, he takes another job and he coaches Kobe and Shaq. Like, it's like, how can you truly say if he was a fantastic coach or if he was just good enough to not mess something up that was obviously good, right? That's how I feel about Dave Roberts. He gets a lot of credit now with all this stuff under his belt of being one of the best managers in the game. I don't know. He might, again, I know this will piss Dodger fans off, and if there's any in the chat, they're probably going to be upset, but I think there's a lot of people that could manage that team and get to the World Series and win the World Series, to be quite honest. There's not a lot of moments where I see, oh, this guy is fantastic. He's a wizard. I will give him a lot of credit for last postseason, because their situation last year was not like it is this year. They were banged up pitching wise, and they needed a lot of bullpen usage. So if I'm ever going to give Dave Roberts credit for anything, it's last year's experience. But this year, I feel like he's barely been tested at all. I mean, he had that moment where he pulls Roki, brings Blake Trinan in. A lot of people second guessed that. It worked out, made him look good. But I would like to see him have to make more than one big decision in the series.
So for you, are you looking at this regular season? They met in August where the Dodgers took 2 of 3. Are you looking at any of that to kind of make your assessment of where these teams are? Are they just widely different from where they were in August? Because 2 months is a very long time.
I don't know if they're wildly different. I think the Dodgers are the best they've been all season. They're healthy. I just think they're the best they've been all season. And the Blue Jays, I think, are a team that knew they were good and then knew they were very good and then held on to the AL East and were like, holy crap, we were able to hold the Yankees off, and now are in full belief mode of like, oh, we're not just a very good team. Like, we might be the best. So I think both of them are different in a way, whereas the Dodgers are just in their best form and the Blue Jays on the mental side of it. And the way they're performing is just, I don't know. I think they're both at their best, which is incredible. I think we are very fortunate to get this matchup, and I hope it ends up being as good visually as I feel like it is when we analyze it.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned before, we had some comment in the chat from Sam saying game 1 is the key. Can the Jays get to Snell or not? The Jays really need game 1. Yeah, we mentioned that before.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's a big piece too. But we know Blake Snell's reemergence as the true ace at the center of that transformation. I mean, talk about the 8 shutout innings against Milwaukee in game 1 of the NLCS, 10 strikeouts, 1 hit allowed. This guy has been combining power, restraint. He's been every bit as advertised. I don't think anyone expected him to be how effective as he's been. And you look at all of these, we talk about game score. I know you mentioned a few weeks ago when we talked about some of the pitchers that go out there, he had a game score of 90 and a 622 win probability added. So it's the single highest mark of this postseason. And you look at his cumulative course of October, Snell's cumulative 1.203 WP has led all players, a number that really doesn't just illustrate the dominance we've seen. It's proof of his ability to perform at the peak is the leverage. I mean, he controlled the game. And then on top of that, you build with Yamamoto behind him, Glass now, and then oh yeah, Shohei Otani is another piece of this. I mean, it is an insane embarrassment of riches that these guys go out there. And Yamamoto is coming off that complete game shutout in game 2 of the NLCS. It was the first 9 inning postseason out by a Dodger in more than 2 decades. And I feel like everyone's still, I mean, we're talking about Otani, of course, but like you have to, we saw the history from Snell and Yamamoto. I think game 1 is immense because Gausman's their best punch as far as pitching goes. And then they got the piece together with the bullpen. I know you like Bieber. I know we like you Savage, but Gausman's the one true workhorse guy that we can be like, you've been here. You're the guy. Go out there and give us length. I think if you get 5 innings, 6 innings from you Savage and maybe Bieber, you would be happy with that. From Gausman, go out there and be a dog, dude. Give us 7 2/3. Give us 8 innings pitch. Why can't you do that?
Yeah, I would be curious, and maybe someone in the chat can look this up for us real quick. I would be very curious to see what the deepest any starting pitcher this season, regular season included, has gone against the Dodgers. That would be a good stat to have there now that you bring that up. Because when you say 7 2/3, 8 innings, I'm over here like, yeah, not happening. Not against the Dodgers. But I'd be curious to know who had the longest performance against the Dodgers this season. We'll try to get that for you at least before the show is over here. So yeah, game 1, again, we haven't had confirmation, I don't believe, that Gausman is the game 1 starter. This is an assumption. I mean, that was the order: Gausman, Savage, Bieber. There's a small chance, and I think we said this off air. I don't think we said it on air. I apologize if we're repeating it, but like there's a small chance that they just try to pull a fast one here and mix it up a little bit and kind of pull the unexpected and say, Trey, we're throwing you out there for game 1. Throw your nastiest stuff at home here. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's Gausman. I mean, he's the logical veteran choice, a guy that's, like we've said, kind of been there, done that, and he's pitching well. So, but you never know. I mean, it is unconfirmed right now. I'm just happy that the Dodgers are not continuing to match up against undecided every single game.
That is a true point. I mean, it's hard to beat them when you're playing bullpen games. I know it was sexy to do the opener thing when the Rays started making it in vogue, but old school baseball, hard-nosed baseball, and going out there and playing the fundamentals right starts and ends with the starting pitcher, and then defense, the fundamentals. That's what I appreciate about these two teams matching up, because they do all of the fundamentals so well. They're not one-dimensional at all. These guys can beat you in all these different directions. And we discussed before, the Blue Jays not being a little engine that could, but the Dodgers are going to have to be, they're going to have to be knocked out. The crown has to be taken from their cold, dead hands. They're not going to let you just take it. So it's going to be a really, really good series. And I think it kind of transitioned us to talk about our predictions here. And you showed your hand a little bit, but I'm curious. You talk about the paths to victory. We've talked about the keys to the series, and we even discussed the expert and market view from some of the experts out there and what Vegas thinks. What do you think, Devin, as far as where the momentum takes both these teams and where they both enter the World Series? How do you see this going?
Well, I'll just give a quick little X factor on each team, and then I'll give you my prediction here. So for the Blue Jays, I'm cheating a little bit because I'm not going to narrow it down to one player. I'm going to narrow it down to a group. I think the Toronto bullpen looms extremely large. I think they're going to have to do more work than the Dodgers bullpen, and they're going to have to come through here. I mean, Louis Varland, I love Louis Varland. What an acquisition. This dude is basically appearing in every game for the Blue Jays. He's incredible. Throws nasty stuff, throws hard. I know a lot of Minnesota Twins fans could not believe they let go of the hometown kid. But I love him. As far as a bullpen as a whole, not sold, but I do think some of them are pitching really well right now. They're my X factor for Toronto. I think the offense is going to hit. Maybe not as well as they did in Seattle because they're facing a great Dodger staff, although the Seattle staff's pretty damn good too, even though they weren't performing kind of up to their potential. But yeah, Toronto bullpen for me is the X factor on that side. And I'm going to give you a weird one for the Dodgers. We know what we get, the Shoheis of the world, the Freddie Freemans of the world, the Mookies of the world. There's one guy who I just always feels like gets forgotten because even like Kike Hernandez is out there being a playoff hero all the time. Max Muncy, this is a gut. I like to go by the gut sometimes. I think there's going to be some big moments with Max Muncy, one way or another, whether something comes down to him or he has a big hit. There's just something about me that is thinking Max Muncy, will he be money or not for the Dodgers? I think he's an X factor there for the Dodgers. And my prediction, and this is a little bit of a gut as well, although I do really believe in it. I'm not sitting here thinking, sometimes you make a prediction because of the gut and in your brain, you really don't believe it. I do believe this one. I'm going Blue Jays in 7.
Wow. And we got Nick in the chat here to give us the answer for, and he also agrees with you. He's not a Dave Roberts fan as well. He talked about some of the other longest starts, and I've been looking it up over here with some of the advanced stats, and he has confirmed what I said. We got 7 innings a few times from a couple players. Logan Webb going 7 innings on September 18th, 2025. Verlander went 7 innings against and only gave up 1 run September 12th, 2025. Luzardo did it on September 17th, giving up 4 runs. Jeffrey Springs did it on May 13th. And I believe that is it as far as who went the distance against the Dodgers. So no one went complete
7 innings.
Yeah, 7 innings is the longest time. So it's going to take, I mean, if you get 7 from Gausman, I think you'd sign up for that. I mean, 100%.
Oh, definitely. Dude, I would sign up. Like I said earlier, I'd sign up for 6 and just get me in the quality start territory. Keep it relatively close. Give our offense a shot.
So for me, looking at this, we've discussed Toronto's path. I believe it's narrower, and I think you'd agree with that, even though you're picking them. It is compelling to think about. Their offense is dangerous enough to win multiple games on just the contact alone, as we were waxing poetic about. And I think Vlad Jr., we talk about players taking control of games. Shohei did it in game 4. His current form really gives him the centerpiece capable of altering a series. And we've seen him kind of carry them offensively. They've done it with all the auxiliary pieces around him. But I think they're going to take advantage of at least one off-script start. Obviously, a night where the Dodgers command falters or the bullpen stretches too thin. We're going to see the Dodgers slip up for the first time. It's been a bit since we've seen them face any adversity. And I think that's a guarantee. We're going to see them face something in this series that will challenge them. And the real question will be, can this Dodger team get back up after they're punched? And I think we've seen them do it. They won the World Series last year. They won back in 2020. This is a dynastic team at this point. They've been doing it for 10 plus years. And I think we're going to be discussing the greatness for a very long time. I think they have the ability to take a punch, get back up, and take a little bit of a beating. And they have and obviously the Blue Jays, we talked about, they have to sustain the edge over 7 games. And I think this will take 7 games. They'll need near perfection sequencing. But in the end, I think the Dodgers balance separates them. No team in baseball combines starting pitching, bullpen reliability, and run prevention with the continuity we've seen from the Dodgers. Over a long series, I think that tends to hold. I think in a shorter series, I mean, the Blue Jays can catch lightning in a bottle, but in a long series, I think the better team will win. The Blue Jays will make this competitive. We've discussed why. I think this might be volatile. We'll have some exciting moments, the energy. I'm excited to see how Rogers Center responds to this. But Los Angeles, particularly on the mound, remains the decisive factor for me. I think the starting pitching will play the difference. I'm predicting the Dodgers in 7 games. I think Toronto will push this to the edge, but LA's combination of everything we discussed before will ultimately be too cohesive to crack. And we're going to get the discussion we'll be having in November. Is this a dynasty? What do we make of this? Did this cause a lockout? Do we have no baseball in 2027? Did they ruin baseball? I am very, very excited for this series. And you mentioned before, just the stat, I want to put more love on it. The last 4 teams to sweep their league championship series, each entering the World Series well rested, have gone on to lose it. So that's interesting. And the Dodgers looking to trump that trend.
Now, wait, is it all right? So the last 4 teams to sweep their championship series? Because the stat I was saying earlier in the episode was when a team that swept their series matches up with a team that went 7. The team that went 7 has won all 4 times in the World Series. Is yours different?
Interesting. I had the stat that I found. It was on a tweet. I wish I could pull it up in front of me. Essentially, the last 4 teams to sweep their league championship series, each entering the World Series well rested, have gone on to lose. I'm thinking the Colorado Rockies in 07.
Yeah, so that's a different stat. Those are similar, related stats, but a little bit different if you read there between the lines.
Yeah, and I think obviously the Dodgers are built to defy that trend. I mean, we're not seeing here that that's going to be the Blue Jays are coming with momentum and they can't get off the mat. They don't depend on timing or volatility. They're a repeatable process. We discussed last week when we were saying they won the pennant. This is what frustrates a lot of fans watching them. If you're not a Dodger fan and you're watching them do this, they're taking the randomness of the October postseason and they're making it repeatable. And that's hard in baseball, obviously, because we've had all these unique champions. They're looking to repeat for the first time since the turn of the century Yankees. We've seen unique champions, which a lot of people that are saying the Dodgers aren't ruining baseball are pointing to. Yeah, we've had all this parity in baseball. We've had the Diamondbacks make it to the World Series. The Texas Rangers won the World Series. You have all these teams that, despite having their own version of dominance, like the San Francisco Giants, they never won back to back. This is the first time they'll be doing this in almost 25 years. So this is kind of uncharted territory we're seeing, and it's just getting better. This Dodger team continues. It feels like they have not peaked yet, which is kind of scary to talk about.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, here's the thing. There's some of those guys, as far as peaking or not, you might be right. But that's another thing, and that's a conversation maybe for the offseason. Like, when is it possible or will it ever happen where we feel like they're at least on a little bit of a decline? And the problem with that conversation is
2033.
well, because here's the thing. The
That's the
obvious
money.
way to like if you're hoping they decline, your reasoning is going to be or some of these guys are getting older. Like Freddie Freeman, maybe he's starting to enter like a very slow decline, like not declining really quickly, but guys like that, some of them are getting older. But then you just remember like they still have FU money and the rules have not changed yet. So they're just going to keep on replenishing. I mean the rumors about Kyle Tucker maybe being a Dodger have already started. So yeah, maybe it's a stupid question by me, but
Yeah, and I think this team looks different. I mean, this team looks pretty similar to last year, but if you look at the 2020 roster, it is a fairly different team. They've done it differently. So
yeah.
they found ways to invest in the infrastructure, and we talked about the scouting last week. This is not just built on toss money at free agents and sign them and then you win the World Series. Clearly, you're a New York Mets fan. That doesn't give you the answer to winning the World Series. We
Yeah,
understand that. But
true.
they have the capital to invest in the right corners, which I believe that's going to make it sustainable for a very long time. And, and we talked about it last week, and there's been a lot of pushback. We had a very positive Dodger fan that commented on our video, which is doing really well when we were talking about the Game 7. We were watching Game 6 live here on Twitter and YouTube at Table Sitters Pod. And he was talking about Shohei Ohtani making him a fan of baseball. So we have to remember that side of things. There is a side of things
Definitely.
where the Dodgers aren't this big, bad Death Star that everyone wants to portray them as. There's a side of people that are enjoying greatness. There is the argument to make the Tom Brady's of the world, the Michael Jordans of the world. That's good for baseball. The Shohei Ohtani's of the world. This is the type of stuff you tell your kids about. And I understand that it might sound hyperbolic, but we're watching something very special in real time, no matter what uniform he's wearing. This Dodger team is doing stuff that we have not seen. Clearly, we haven't seen back-to-back champions in 25 years since the Yankees did it. So, and it's on the back of something very, very special with the spotlight and the platform, and baseball's humming at a pace we have not seen. The championship series did record numbers. We haven't seen the numbers that we've seen viewership wise. So it's good for baseball. Not a Dodger fan, admittedly. It sucked when they beat my Yankees last year, but to sit here and say the Dodgers are ruining baseball, I just think that conversation is so nearsighted that people need to move away from it.
I'm just really tired of the whole conversation. I'll just reiterate because the more people that hear it, the better. I've been amazed at how long that conversation has lasted. And a lot of it's the same people going back and forth, just arguing with each other about the who's worse, the Dodgers spending too much money or the Pirates of the world not spending enough. And I will remind you guys again, it is both, and it is also neither of their faults. It is the system. Steve, you put it really well at the beginning, I believe, of last episode of saying they're taking advantage in the Dodgers way of things of a system that exists. They're not doing anything illegal, right? They have advantages and they're using them. And the Pirates of the world, a lot of these teams are not pocketing money like you think they are. They're actually still losing it. If you really look at more than just player payroll and all the other expenses they have. Another thing is, and I didn't really mention this last time, a lot of these guys took lots of loans out during COVID that have also hurt their bottom line and are still trying to bounce back from that stuff. So the argument of who's responsible for ruining baseball, number one, is dumb because baseball hasn't been ruined. It's flourishing, like we just said. And number two, it's a false narrative. It's a system in place, and yes, there are things that need to be fixed, but it's not one or the other. It's not an either or issue. Both ends, there are things that need to be fixed and things that need some help and some adjusting.
So do you think for this, I know we're so close to it and we watch baseball very, very closely and intimately. Do you think there is the general population appeal to this? Because I was hearing a lot of murmuring about the Shohei Ohtani thing. After Game 4, we hit the 3 home runs. People that are typically not baseball fans were talking about this. It transcended. Shohei has been a superstar in our worlds for a very long time. And I think a lot of people know him from the advertisements, but I think that Game 4 performance pushed him through to the other side where you had NFL fans. They were talking about this on College Game Day in the morning on a college campus. They're discussing Shohei Ohtani. So I think there was a world where he emerged through, and people are interested in this drama. I mentioned at the open of the show some of the hockey media discussing the Toronto Blue Jays and falling in love with the pageantry that is baseball, and the hockey that is happening in regular season in October is so secondary to what the Blue Jays are doing. You are creating a buzz that is unlike anything else we ever get to witness. We mentioned, you put on our Twitter at Table Setters Pod, just playoff baseball is just on a different level. And it's so true when you're watching the drama and the hurt that the Mariner fans are feeling. I mentioned you hurt because it means something, and the feeling of stress and all of that. And also on the other side of it, the immense joy you get from when your team finally breaks through and wins. There's nothing like the structure of baseball. And you can even find in the depths of Twitter, I know it is accessible most times, but there's a lot of people that are discovering baseball for the first time, talking about the way it's formatted, of just like really emphasizing the drama and putting pressure, and it just builds and builds and builds to this crescendo where it's really the perfect game. And I understand like we're biased because we watch baseball and we love it. We podcast about it, but it's built for moments like this and for moments like George Springer, where that will live forever. There'll be pictures of that. People will be telling, like, you're going to see that clip thousands of times in your lifetime, maybe more, because of how much it meant to the city of Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your initial question about like, do you feel like it broke through to like the general public? To a degree, yeah, yeah. I mean, if anyone's gonna break through, it's the Shohei Otanis and the Aaron Judges of the world that break through. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to this time of year, if someone has the World Series on and you're in that household, like you may pay a little bit of attention because there's so much more pageantry there. But yeah, it is the best. You're right. It's just there's just nothing like it if you actually sit down and pay attention, the drama of it. I mean, getting that George Springer moment, I will say, we're on the long end of things. We're going to wrap up here in a minute, but watching, I told you the next day, we got the stat about that was the highest CWPA championship win probability added in an ALCS game in history. And I'm like, oh, this is a pretty cool stat. Let me look more up about this. So look at Baseball Reference. And I spent like an hour or two just going through this chart. And I guess it makes me a baseball nerd, but it's just fascinating stuff. And it brings you down memory road of like, oh, yeah, I remember that moment. I remember that game. And it also shows you like, I don't really know this moment as well as maybe I should. And you look it up and you can learn. And this, if you haven't looked, guys, like that are listening, the CWPA, I know Steve mentioned just WPA, wins probability added, a couple times tonight. The championship wins probability added is just a fascinating look at just all-time moments. And I tweeted out earlier, it's interesting because George Springer was the highest ALCS moment ever, but only 77th on the whole postseason list. And obviously, the large majority are World Series moments. And the highest of the high are usually World Series Game 7. Makes sense when you really think about what the stat is, obviously. But there were 6 NLCS moments above George Springer's moment. And that's fascinating. Then you look into that. And then you look at the top 10, and there's one game that has 3 moments in the top 10. 1960 World Series, Pirates, Yankees, Game 7. I think most baseball fans know Bill Mazeroski, but that game was just insane as a whole, back and forth, like just wild. The 2016 World Series between the Cubs and the then Indians had, I believe, 2 moments in the top 20, I think. So there's argument for that. Like, you talk about what's the greatest game of all time. Like, you look at a list like that and you can really start to form a legitimate argument. Just a really cool list to look at. Nick, if you're still in the chat, you said you use StatMuse to find the game log for pitchers against the Dodgers. That came up for me too, but it locked me out after 25. I thought I had a sign in, but it's not letting me look at it. Let me know if you have the entire list, and which would make it sure that it's the 7-inning thing. If not, I'm going to continue to look at that. I want to confirm that 7 innings is the furthest anybody's gone against the Dodgers this year. I think that's an interesting stat to know.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback on what you said, the traditional box score really fails to capture what determines victory, especially in the postseason where hits, strikeouts, runs, ERAs, they're telling part of the story. But I think that misses the weight of when those things happen, like you mentioned before. So I think the modern postseason being a sport of leverage, we discussed that in depth before, where I think WPA or a postseason WPA does add a telling way to measure it. And it measures a player's specific actions, whether at the plate, on the mat, like all those things, win expectancy after the play and before the play. I think context is everything. And that's so cool about baseball, where you can go back in history and apply it to things that have happened before. And I mean, it's a small sample in October, but I think a modest WPA can be revealing. A player that has plus 0.3 has effectively been responsible for about a third of the team's win through high leverage performance, and anything above 1.0 signals dominance. And we mentioned George Springer, where the individual single-handedly swung multiple games. And that was such a big win for the Blue Jays, obviously, that it weighs a little bit higher. And obviously, Blake Snell, 1.202 WPA, not only leads all players this October, but ranks top 30 in single postseason totals since the metrics introduction. So it kind of puts in perspective what it actually means and what he's been doing.
Yeah, and George Springer now on the all-time CWPA list is at the top, above everybody. And he has part of it, he has an advantage. He's had a lot of at-bats in big moments, but he's also come through in a lot of big moments. And obviously, there's always going to be the argument that to poke the hole in his legacy as a whole of like, well, he did a lot of that on the cheating Astros teams. And I don't really have an argument to go back on you on that one. But I will say, I think his time in Toronto, especially this year, for the most part, has proven like he's actually a legitimate, just a great player in clutch situations. We don't know how much credit we can give him for some of the clutch moments in Houston, but I mean, you can't take these away from him, and we'll see what he does in the World Series. And to go back, I know you mentioned some of them before, but the stat about the 7 games against the sweepers. So this year, Dodgers swept, Blue Jays went 7 games in the LCS. 2012, Tigers swept the LCS. Giants went 7 games in the LCS. Giants beat the Tigers. You said this one before. Rockies in 2007 swept the LCS. Red Sox went 7 in the LCS. Red Sox beat the Rockies. 2006, Tigers once again, swept the LCS. Cardinals won the LCS in 7 games. Cardinals won the World Series. In 1988, going back further here, the only other time this has been a matchup like this, Athletics swept the LCS. Dodgers won the LCS in 7 games. Dodgers won the World Series. So that is what we were mentioning before with the sweepers against the 7-game series. And Nick just told us, so that stat music locked him out too, so he's only able to see the first like 25 or so games against the Dodgers. So after we're done recording, it'll be easier for me to really try to dig in and find that stat, and we'll tweet it out as far as who has gone the longest against the Dodgers this year as a starting pitcher. I find that very interesting to look at.
So as we wrap up here, we appreciate everybody in the chat, especially Nick, and we had new someone in here, Sam, with awesome stuff. Thank you guys for listening to what we did here. We like going live here in the postseason. If you guys enjoy what we do, follow us at Table Service Pod on IG and also on X. Subscribe to YouTube as well. Kind of growing over there. Some of the video has been watched there. Maybe you guys are over there watching on YouTube. Well, thank you. If you can, please leave a 5-star review on wherever you listen to the podcast, Apple, Spotify. It goes a long way. Helps people find us in the algorithm. We were trending on Apple Podcasts under baseball. Good Pod always gives us the love as well, but help other baseball fans find what we're doing here. And that's the best way we can spread the love.
No doubt about it. We'll be back. My guess is sometime early or mid next week to discuss what has happened in the series so far and kind of talk about how we think it might all come to an end. So stay tuned. We'll be back relatively shortly. 1 series left, but it feels like there's still a lot that's going to happen here going into this last week.
All right, guys, with that being said, we're going to get out of here. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your night. As always, we'll talk to you after a while. And as always, happy baseball.